fence.
And my daughter, Virginia.
What?
So,
You didn't want to pick a darker blue because you work close to Lansing, which is, would take great offense at some blue, darker blue color.
I've got one sister.
You don't get the sports reference?
No, I get it. I get it. My wife's a U of M grad. I get it.
Oh,
So, work with-
yeah. There we go.
And that's, is that like a Christmas morning kind of? Yeah. Something happens about. Honor that.
All right, folks, I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is 7:03 PM. We can start with the moment of silence, please. Stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Of the United States of America. And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As a reminder, if you happen to have a cell phone on you, please make sure it's off or on silent. City Clerk Domingo, if you'll take roll call for us, please.
Councilmember Williams,
Present.
Reed, Stewart,
Present.
Frost,
Here.
Davis,
Here.
French,
Here.
and Harrison.
Here. Do I have a motion to approve of the agenda?
So motion.
Support.
Councilman French?
Thank you. I would like, given the short notice to, and lack of, opportunity to think about and make a decision, I'd like us to strike 9 or 11F from our agenda. Invite, Virgie to come and, explain what she's hoping to do with this resolution and take it up at our next meeting, if it's something we wish to move forward.
Okay. So we have a motion to table.
No, you're at approval of your agenda, so it's an amendment to the,
Agenda.
Amendment to the agenda, okay. So Councilman Stewart, you made the motion to approve. So
Table takes precedent. You have to vote on tabling, and if it passes, it's tabled. If it doesn't pass, then we vote to approve.
first process to vote on the table.
so it's not a tabling. It's, you guys are in the removal of your agenda. We're talking about removing something from the agenda. So the question is, are you approving the agenda with the amendment or not? So there's not
It's an amendment.
when you can approve your agenda, and then if you want to table it, you address it when you get to the agenda item. If you're talking about approving the agenda with an amendment, then it's just, realistically, it's just an amendment to the agenda. It's,
I move that we strike 11F from the agenda to make that amendment to our agenda.
So does Councilman Stewart have to?
well, the question is whether he accepts that as a friendly amendment.
Would you accept it as a friendly amendment?
Depends, can we talk about it or do we wait?
Sure. So you received information, be it not a lot, regarding item F. It's highlighted in our agenda, which means it was added last minute.
Right.
It represents perhaps a fundamental change in the way the agency operates. I would like more information. I would like the people involved to be present to answer questions before we take up that decision, because this would then approve that resolution without having those interested parties and serving on the EDC board being present to understand what their motivations are, motivations of the EDC board to make this change to their bylaws.
Thank you.
I got a question. Councilman French, you said last minute, but this was in our agenda packet that we received on Thursday. So can you clarify last minute for me?
So the information that is provided, I didn't find satisfactory in terms of all the information I needed to make an informed decision. So I think that this is a little premature. So I received the update in an email that had this thing highlighted on Monday or today. So
Now, you do see us in our agenda packet though.
I do. I
Okay,
do.
all right, I just wanted to make sure. Just for the context, of
Sure.
understanding what you meant by last minute. Now, your problem is approving it today?
Yes,
Do you have a problem with discussing it today?
not at all.
Okay.
But,
Are you,
but I would like not just Ms. Ammerman to be present, but the foundational change in this bylaw is now going to bring folks from the townships who are not contiguous to us to be voting members of our EDC board. And I'm not a fan of that, but I'd like them to be present. I'd like the board president to be present so that they can talk to us about why this needs to happen apart from a particular project that they're involved in. I just think it's premature that we then give 3 voting members of our board to people who do not have an economic interest in our city per se. It's a project that they're hoping to develop. And if that project were to come to pass, then maybe that we could consider it. But because we don't have anything written down that says exactly that this project is going to happen, and I'm talking about the 425 project, having a township supervisor on the board that's not contiguous to our city doesn't make sense to me.
and you mentioned contiguous.
Mhm.
Meaning not in the city?
Meaning that they represent a part of our state that is not attached by line to our city. So Parma Township, for example,
Okay.
is not attached to the city of Albion. Sheridan Township is, Albion Township is, but Parma Township is not. So why that person should be on our board in any respect is something I have a problem with.
So I made the motion and I just like to say, I would like to just talk about it, even if we
Absolutely.
don't vote it on it and approve it tonight. And I don't see why we wouldn't. With
Absolutely.
respect to you, I
Mhm.
get what you're saying, but I think we can start the conversation tonight.
So then I think what I'm hearing from council is, I think what you do is you change it to a discussion item only.
All right, and some additional feedback and the purpose and findings. The Parma Township doesn't seem to be on there. I see there was a mention of the Albion Township and the Albion College president both being ex officio, non-voting members. Being ex officio, non-voting members. And then the mayor of the city of Albion, the supervisors of Sheridan and Albion Township so serve as ex officio voting members. I don't see. Is that the type of, so maybe that was the update that we didn't.
So if you look at section 6 on page 55 of our packet, the last phrase, the supervisors of Sheridan and Parma Township shall serve as ex officio voting members of the board.
Copy. Thank you.
Mhm.
So then we are amending to have this as a discussion item instead of action item. Correct?
I'd like to amend my motion. That,
So approve the agenda,
You needed support for that.
Support.
There you go. Now you can-
item F. To be discussion and not approve for tonight's purposes. You take a roll call on this or all in favor?
It doesn't need to be roll call, it's just agenda approval of the agenda.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So we'll start off with our EDC presentation. I will turn the floor over to Ms. Ammerman.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council, City Manager Terry. It's great to be here tonight. Thank you for allowing me to report in on a regular basis on the things happening at the EDC. It was 2 years ago this month, actually, that we began working, not in terribly public way, but in a very meaningful way to welcome Ford Blue Oval Battery Park to Marshall. So it's been a solid 2 years now that we've been working on that. Hard to believe. We spent a lot of time in meetings, for the 3 months following to make sure that it was welcoming to Ford and that they got the 425 arrangements and the zoning changes that they needed to be able to open that park. And that began a journey for the EDC board to vision what that might mean for the city of Albion and the region expanding past Albion. It became very clear from the state's perspective that a regional approach to not only the Blue Oval Battery Park, but any further expansion into industry would demand and require a regional lift so that the state was very comfortable in investing in the city of Albion as we begin that journey of industrial development. So a lot of things that became very clear during the 2024 year to the 2023 year to the EDC board was to begin to accelerate some of their focuses that you would see in their 5-year plan and also in the city's plan. So taking a very hard look at what was already in the plans, but realizing that this was going to become accelerated beyond belief. So we're very excited that we've been able to hop on the horse and keep riding. We are accelerating on your behalf our focus on workforce development so that not only can our current residents, but new residents find work not only at Ford Blue Oval, but also here in our own city. So we have a lot of employers who may have people leave and go to Ford Blue Oval. So we would want to make sure that we are priming people to take those jobs. We've also accelerated our focus on our housing needs, our childcare needs, our transportation needs, our training, and quite frankly, encouraging folks who maybe had lost hope in being in the workforce to be able to be back in the workforce. So a lot of encouragement and a lot of hand-holding. And yes, you really can work at Ford. Yes, you really can work at Ford. And to repeat that over and over. So people don't think these jobs are beyond them and beyond their skill set. We have accelerated our focus on advanced manufacturing needs. These are cool jobs. These are cool jobs for our kids. These are cool jobs for folks that are re-entering the workforce. Ford has been very gracious in their practices and their acceptance of those re-entering the workforce from various backgrounds. So we're very excited about that. We're very excited about Ford's interest in supporting the Opportunity High School. We are very interested in what might happen there from a training center. We're very excited about what might happen in the new industrial park from a training center. And that is in both Calhoun County and Jackson County. And the work has already begun to work with Jackson College to bring training into the new industrial park, which will straddle Calhoun County and Jackson County. And to Councilperson French's question will be in Parma Township. So the plans are well underway to have the training facilities located not only in Calhoun County, but in Jackson County to serve those folks who have 49224 zip codes in Parma. So very excited about those plans. Our new marketing theme is welcome home to opportunities. We are looking at people like me who graduated here in 1984 and have come home. And we are seeing a lot of movement in that realm. People are coming home and they're not going to come home to the same small town they left. They're coming home to a town that has enormous opportunities. So our phrase, welcome home to opportunities, means just that. You're not coming home to the town you left. You're coming home to an extraordinarily opportunistic town, and we're happy to have folks come back. I believe in your packet, although I didn't check before I got here, but I believe the 6 board goals are included in your packet. So I will just go over those briefly because the introduction that I just gave was a high level summary. But the board has spent about 4 months now coming up with these board goals that they have now adopted to be able to support not only the city of Albion, but Sheridan Township, Albion Township as is mandated by agreement, and also the surrounding regions. I was at a meeting this morning at Calhoun County, and we are collaborating heavily with City of Battle Creek. So this has become a regional lift, and as we are rolling all these plans out, Parma Township will end up being contiguous to the city because of the 425 arrangements that are already in place. So the first board goal is enhancing technical education. We don't want to see anybody who doesn't have a competitive education looked over. The nice thing about what Ford is looking for and what other employers here in Albion also are looking for might not be a 4-year engineering degree, but it might be something that you can get in buckets of training that we're putting together in programs. So you wouldn't have to go back to college for a 4-year degree, but you can get a lot of what you need out of these stacked credentials that these employers are looking for. So as we learn what each employer needs, that's the stacked credential that will be built by our community colleges, by Goodwill of South Central Michigan, by MW Tech, by MMTC. They're all involved in the stacked credential process. We have community colleges from across the entire state willing to come to Albion to provide this training. The second board goal is creating and preserving housing, including housing safety net options. So this part of the program is because employers will ask, where will my new employees live? And that's the first question we get as soon as we have a bite on the new industrial park. They want to know, do you have enough housing? So we are able to say, by the time your plant is built, we will have housing because we have over 500 units that are either in a start position or will be in a start position in the next year. So that's a big number for this area. We need 1,500 units to be able to attract enough people to really bring the city back to an area and to a space where they can afford, you all can afford your infrastructure. But that's a big start. 1,500 homes, 1,500 units could be as many as 4,500 people on average. To do that, we need to attract developers, which we have had a lot of luck in, and we will continue to work with those developers. And thank you again for the ability as the EDC to represent the city in the marketplace with housing developers. We need to increase our capacity for industrial growth. Our industrial growth will come not only in skilled workforce, but also in the ability to have the land and structures ready to go when people decide they might want to come back to Albion or come to Albion for that opportunity from an infrastructure perspective in the new industrial park, which is set to be 625 acres. And the current industrial park where there are a couple of warehouses that are available. But as we move to the training models, we will find that we will use those for forklift training. We will be using those for warehouse training. We'll be using those spaces for any kind of training that a person wants to bring into town. So we are going to be utilizing all of our empty space to make sure we're using it for training. The next item is coordinating workforce training opportunities. The EDC has adopted a new program called Upskilling, the Albion Region Growth Collaborative. This is UGARSI. So it's a name that we've adopted as the work group. This work group, again, is statewide, but the hub is here in Albion. And so we are bringing folks have volunteered to come in and help. We are using AmeriCorps students to get the word out to people who might be a good candidate. So we have AmeriCorps support for this. We have MW Tech support for this. We have Michigan Manufacturing Association support for this. This is all happening right here in Albion. So in your town, you are going to be the hub for training. We aren't creating credentials. We aren't creating training. We are just the pipeline to facilitate, to make sure everybody in Albion knows about the training that's possible so that you too can go to work at a Ford Motor Company. Like that is not beyond reality at this point. And we also will be backfilling any roles that happen to become vacant in the city. we'll be attracting and expanding commercial presence. The second question that developers ask when they are bringing their industry, as soon as they know if their people have somewhere to live, they want to know where they're gonna eat. So a big push is on how to bring a wide variety of food. So how do we bring food into the area that people will want? So we have a fair number of requests. We're keeping track of those, and those are the types of commercial spaces that we are trying to make available. The best kind of commercial development is market driven. So we need to do it from a community-based perspective, and it needs to be what the market's looking for. So finding that out takes boots on the ground. Again, another set of surveys. So we have a survey right now for the workforce development team. Eventually, we'll have another survey about commercial needs. We have surveys from the past, but we are in a different place now. So we want to make sure and be inclusive. And the last of the 6 goals is to develop and support entrepreneurs. So we want to make sure that there are families here in town that were raised by entrepreneurs and they have that in their blood. And it's not easy to get rid of. Ask me, I can tell you. So it's a lot of work, but it's what makes some people very joyful and very happy and very productive. And so it's our job to make sure that in addition to an 8-to-5 job or a 9-to-6 job or a 3rd shift or a 2nd shift job, if somebody wants to work half a day as an entrepreneur, they get to. And I say half a day because my dad taught me, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you can work whatever half day you want. 12 hours, whatever 12 hours you want, and you work it 7 days a week. And we have people in town that do that. So we want to support them. We want to make sure we find a place for them to have their hub and where they can be successful. So the EDC board thanks you very much for the support of all of you and the work that we're doing from their mouths to your ears. Please have a Merry Christmas and a great New Year. I don't think we will see you again before then. So thank you so much.
Any questions for Ms. Sanderman? All right. Next is our proclamation for the Tree City USA designation. Whereas in 1872, the Nebraska Board of Agriculture established a special day to be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas trees can be a solution to combating climate change by reducing the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind, water, and cutting heating and cooling posts, moderating the temperature, cleaning the air, producing life-giving oxygen, and providing habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, Victoria Garcia Snyder, Mayor of the City of Albion, do hereby proclaim April 26, 2024 as Arbor Day in the City of Albion.
2025.
2025.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Look at that. And I urge all citizens to celebrate our Arbor Day and support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. And further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. So this allows our Tree City Committee to be able to apply for grants. All right.
Yeah, and well, as I'm totally in favor of this, as well as organizations in town can work collaboratively with the tree committee. And that has been done. So I'm very much in favor of this. Something positive for our community.
Public comments. If there's anybody in the gallery that would like to stand and address council.
Mayor, I think you still have a pivot presentation. Your agenda.
Oh, did I? Am I going off the one?
City manager search pivot group.
Right, our pivot group information,
Yes.
are you taking care of that, or do we have a representative here?
No, I can.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of council. In your agenda packets this evening was a questionnaire. This is for council to fill out what their priorities are in moving forward with a city manager search. Mr. Freed also gave us a letter describing his approach. He's very excited, and I am too, that Albion is a desirable place to live and work. So once we have this for filled out, what we would like is to have this brought back to my office. I will send them up to Mr. Freed for him to compile. From there, that gives us a basis of what to look for in a candidate. And I think that's very important because we're looking for continuity, longevity, and of course, performance. So I would certainly appreciate the sooner that you get these back to me, the more I would appreciate it. And we will start our search right after the first of the year. We'll start advertising. I welcome any questions or comments you might have.
Councilman Stewart.
Do you have a suggested date you'd like to have it back by? I mean, when will you be in the office? The last of this year?
Oh, I plan on working. So at your convenience, I'll be around.
I think a date's a good idea. It's the 30th, okay?
Yes. 30th would be fine.
Any other questions for our interim city manager? Right. Thank you. I apologize for that oversight. Now, public comments. If there's anybody that would like to stand and address council in regards to an agenda item, you may do so at this time.
Hi again, my name is Virgie Ammerman. I live at 305 East Main Street in Homer. And I thank you for the work that you do. And I wanted to just take a public comment option because I know it's probably not appropriate for me to comment during your discussion later on the bylaw amendments that the board has requested. The board has approved, the EDC board has approved this and is bringing it to council for your consideration and approval. The goal is to include Dick Porter because Dick Porter happens to be the Sheridan Township Supervisor currently, or whoever would be in his seat if he were to leave. And the Parma Township Supervisor as voting ex officio members, meaning like the mayor, they have the seat because they are in the seat of their current situation. And the reason that both of those are appropriate on the EDC board at this point is because of the regional flavor of the industrial park development. There's really no reason that development won't occur. And we've done a lot of community engagement work already. We have a lot of support from the state level. The Sheridan Township Supervisor has specifically asked that he be on this board as a voting member. He currently is appointed as a non-voting member, but he would like to have a vote if this much of the Sheridan Township will be absorbed into the city. Because what will happen is all the way up to the edge of Jackson County, that will become part of the city. That's how a 425 project works. So you will be responsible for your municipality services to that point. The Parma Township Supervisor is very interested in supporting this because we also will be expanding on into Jackson County. So those options are underway right now. And it would be most appropriate for her to also be on from the city's perspective. From the state's perspective, they are very anxious to see, again, a regional approach. So they like to see that all the townships are lined up. Ken Blight, who is currently the supervisor of the Albion Township Board, does not choose to want to elevate his position from non-voting to voting. If there's ever someone else in that seat and they'd like to have that conversation, certainly would be appropriate, especially if we have a development occurring in Albion Township. But since the development is occurring in Sheridan Township and Parma Township, the board is very anxious to include these two members on their board. The other addition would be that the college president would have an ex officio non-voting membership. And that would be a good way to ensure that the college has an opportunity to inform the EDC board and vice versa on things that are happening. So that's what the board, the EDC Tifa BRA board would like to see happen, and that's the proposal that was meant to come to you tonight. So I appreciate the help. Thank you.
Consent calendar items. In your packet, you have the December 2nd study session and regular session minutes along with the December 9th study session minutes. And then information on the holiday party that is to be held tomorrow. Do I have a motion to approve?
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Do I have a motion to approve the second reading of ordinance 2024-10 to amend our mobile food vending?
So moved.
Support.
Attorney Hartman.
So as we've gone over the last couple of meetings, this was an ordinance to modify the existing mobile food vending ordinance. It carves out an exception where council can waive the requirements of getting a mobile food vending permit for special events or community events. The mobile food vendors participating in those events would still have to obtain insurance that lists the city as an additional insured. The idea behind this was because, you know, like for Festival of the Forks, we found that mobile food vendors were having to pay both the chamber and the city for essentially the same thing. We've gone over this one several times. The most recent modification was under, as I discussed in the study session, section 22-242, where we go over disqualifying criminal offenses from the background check. We made, if anybody has any of the following offenses in their criminal history at any time, homicide, rape, or abduction, they are disqualified. If they have any of the following offenses in the 10 years immediately preceding the application, they're disqualified: robbery, embezzlement, fraud, and indecent exposure. Other than that, the ordinance remains unchanged from its first reading. As I indicated during our study session, the indecent exposure was an addition. Chief and I talked about that briefly after our last meeting. He indicated that was actually an issue that the city was dealing with presently, so it made sense to add that since we're making a change to the ordinance. So happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Attorney Hartman?
No.
You clerk move it?
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
French,
Yes.
and Mayor Snyder.
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve resolution 2024-42 for our fiscal year 2025 budget?
So moved.
Support.
Dr. Clark?
I thought Jason was getting up to ask for more money.
It's got a big stack.
Not yet.
All righty. 2025 budget.
Anything you want.
So this is the 2025 budget. We start out with our general fund. This is what I went over the last 3 weeks, Monday sessions. It shows what our budget's going to be for next year. We anticipate about a $400,000 loss. Like I said earlier in the study session, I don't believe that that's where we're going to end up. But that's what was budgeted based on all the salaries and everything. So that's what the 2025 is going to look like. I think I went over that pretty good in the study session. If there's any more questions. And then the next page is our special revenue funds. Again, main concern here was the deficit for 2025, but that will be cured from the 2024 positive amount that was shown in the amended budget. But this is all our special revenue funds, what we anticipate the budgets for revenue and appropriations. And then our debt service funds, we're down to 3. I cleared 2 of them off because the debt was paid off. And Next year, we'll have to have a transfer in from the street department, or street improvement fund to cover the MTF bond debt service, and that's normal. That will happen every year. For 2024, we were able to pay most of it with the premium from sale of bonds to do the street work for the water district project. So only 3 funds left there. Those are just set up to pay debt, basically. The enterprise funds are next. Those are our water and sewer funds. We have surpluses in both of them, especially in the water fund. And that is to pay for completion of the water tower for next year. And we still have $10 million of debt that we're trying to secure to help pay for the project because the USDA backed out of that. But we are in the process the first couple months of this year to look for funding on that, and we have our financial guys and our attorney working on it as we speak. So that's the enterprise funds for next year. Internal service fund, just been about break even. That's what that fund should do every year unless there's a large equipment purchases like the budget 24. That's just basically to service the equipment and to charge rent to the other funds as they use all the equipment that is owned by the equipment pool fund. So that should just about break even, and that's pretty close there with a little bit of a profit. And then we have our other funds. Our brownfield, EDC, TIFA, DDA, CDBG, and the revolving loan fund. These numbers were based on the original city budgets that I produced 2 weeks ago or last week, I believe. And these are not what was produced by the EDC board. So we're looking at fund 240, or excuse me, 244. So that's pretty much in a deficit. Revenues were not enough to cover the expenses in that fund. So that's how that came out. And then the trust funds are there below.
Director Clark.
Yes.
I was just on the wrong.
Oh, okay.
Can I interject something?
Sure.
As you know, charter requires the manager and staff to create a budget. And there's a lot of back and forth on those budgets. In considering putting a budget together, we have to follow certain concrete formats for uniform, according to the Uniform Governmental Budgeting Act. That means that, and I want to simplify this, is that it is just good practice, and I think I conveyed this at our last meeting, that revenues should meet expenses and vice versa. Expenses should not exceed what we expect to take in. It's only good. Now, we understand that from time to time, in anticipation of receiving those monies, you do want to budget realistically. However, that requires a certain amount of documentation from those grant agencies to suggest that the money's coming. So as an administration, and we have to stand the test of audit as well. And so when we put this budget together, it wasn't in defiance or trying to create disharmony among any group in the community. It was done out of respect to our citizens and knowing that our city council and its staff were going to do everything responsible in this business. So I guess to take a little bit of heat off Dave, the heat falls on me a little bit, making decisions that I believe that over the course of my career, you just should not ever budget a revenue that is not documented or exceeds, or the expense exceeds what that expected revenue is. I think that's only responsible on our part. And again, it's no disrespect to any board or commission or any individual. This is the way that we have to conduct ourselves. We do that at home. We have an income and we have to guide our expenses reflecting such. So I needed to just make that explanation as how we approach governmental budgeting.
All right, so finishing up on the other funds, you can see that most of them came out okay. For the other funds here. And then the trust funds, of course, are just held in trust, paid out to a third party eventually. And again, I want to zero in on the pension plan for the public safety. It came out really well this year based on how the stock market went. So these will be the 2025 budget that we'll start with for 2025. Doesn't mean we'll stay with these numbers the whole year, but this is where we're going to start. And that's what we came up with.
Any questions for Director Claus? Councilman French?
On page 35 of our packet. The heading is City of Albion 2025 budget. We've got almost 9 million in the EDC fund.
Yes, that was the original budget that was done by the EDC.
I understand.
Yeah.
But are we or are we not approving page 35 because it's the 2025 budget?
Well, I think Sonia redid all this. and
It's
sent this out
page
there.
36 in the existing packet.
Oh, it's on the tabletop.
Oh,
It's on the table. Oh, okay.
So I think Sonia, we redid these numbers.
Okay.
After our
It was in
discussion
the- Okay.
earlier.
Mine's on.
And so I switched everything out back to my
Okay.
original budgets.
While you're looking, can I
It's in this. But it
Yep.
doesn't have.
just an easy one, but would you restate what you were telling us about the debt service funds?
Oh.
The MTF bond, you're saying it was transferred each year for the MTF from some.
Yeah.
The right page.
Just didn't catch what you said.
All right, so
Yep, that was.
the MTF bonds were a sell of bonds to pay for the street portion of the water system project.
Right.
It's a $27 million project. Roughly 2.8 million of it is for roads. And the other part is for the new tower. So the street portion has to be shown in the street improvement fund. And so the sale of bonds for that portion of the project are shown in 2024 as revenue. 2.79 million. So that's why back in 2020 or in the other resolution, you'll see a large profit in 2024 in the street improvement fund. Because most,
The what fund?
the street improvement fund,
Thank
on 450. Is showing a large profit in 2024 because we have revenue of close to 2.8 million from the sale of bonds. And that flows down and shows a large profit for that year, but the money's going to be spent the next year, 2025, to cover all that construction of the new road portion of that. Now, the debt for those bonds has to be separated from the street improvement fund and set up as a debt fund to handle the debt and interest payments, principal and interest payments of the sale of the bonds. We eventually have to pay those bonds off. So each year we make a principal payment and 2 interest payments every 6 months. So with the money that the street improvement fund got, every year it needs to transfer money over to the debt fund so it can pay the principal and interest of the debt. If it was an enterprise fund, then we wouldn't have to set up a special debt service fund. It just goes up on the balance sheet as a liability. And the principal payments get made just like a regular business. Principal knocks off the loan, the interest is shown down in the appropriation section.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions on 2025? So that'll be our budget for 2025. And then we started with an original budget in 2024. And when I create the budget, I have to determine what I think our projected numbers are gonna be at the end of the year, 2012-31-24.
So Director Clark, I think we have to approve the 25 budget first.
Okay.
We will do that.
All right.
We had a motion and support, correct?
Yes.
Right. Any other questions in regards to the 2025 budget? I'm sorry, go ahead, Attorney Hartness.
Just a question with and I'm just looking at our charter here regarding, our budgets indicating that proposed expenditures shall not exceed the expected revenues. With the new EDC budget, it looks like the expenditures exceed the revenues. Is that being made up somewhere else so that we're not running afoul of the charter?
That's in the other funds. These are actual numbers that I anticipate are gonna happen. I'm just gonna speak freely if I can. All right. The EDC has a very large staff compared to previous years. It costs money for that staff. There was a lot of marketing done this year, over $150,000 just in marketing the EDC. A lot of attorney's fees and some other various fees. I think I gave you a list over there. And usually the EDC takes in grant money and they spend it. And it usually doesn't create such a large deficit. But with such a large staff that's over there, and the fact that the revenues that were budgeted for 4.6 million for 2024, only 260 or 70,000 came in. So you budget 4.5 and you bring in 270,000 and you add this big staff, it doesn't work. And that's why you're seeing a deficit. And I think the budget for next year is showing the same thing because she has a large staff. They have a large staff over there. And they need the revenue to support it. Now, about a year and a half or maybe 2 years ago, she sold a piece of, or the EDC sold a piece of property for about a little over $500,000. And all that money came into the EDC. Well, a lot of it is gone. And in my own opinion, I don't think that should be that way. That was a piece of property that the city or the EDC owned, and it was sold, and most of that revenue has been spent. And unless we turn it around a little bit, we're going to have a problem there. And that's just my opinion.
Attorney Hartness.
So I don't mean to put you on the spot, Dave, but just, for my part, and this is just the attorney in me, just making sure that we're staying on the right side of the charter. When the city budgets in excess, if we have expenditures in excess of our revenue, we take some from the general fund or from the fund balance when we
Right.
need to.
Right.
So I guess my question is, how does the EDC get back to like a where revenue and appropriations are a push?
They need to start taking in grants. But even if they do that, the staff is quite large.
So then I guess my question is, should then, to make sure that we're zero, instead of 131,000 in the red, should the expenditures be 131,742 less?
Well, if we're looking at the EDC for 2024, right?
25.
Oh, 25. That money's gonna have to come from somewhere. Eventually, if these numbers pan out.
Okay.
And again, if you're gonna hire such a large staff, then you're gonna have to be able to afford it. And property taxes do not come into the EDC. They come into the brownfield, they come into the TIFA. And the revolving loan fund, of course, is there to give out loans. So the only two funds in the EDC's group that actually gets revenue every year is the brownfield and the TIFA. And of course, the TIFA is for the industrial part. So that's kind of my feelings on it.
So basically, they need development in order to bring in additional revenue.
Yeah, well, I don't question things, but a lot of money is being spent in the TIFA, or not the TIFA, but the EDC fund for marketing, attorney's fees, salaries, wages, things that go along with salaries and wages, employee benefits. And so the money has to come from somewhere to substantiate such a large staff. And unless the city is willing to maybe transfer money in every year to cover it, the money's got to come from somewhere.
David, I got a question about the staff. I know, it was said by the previous city manager that their staff should have been around 5 people. At the time of the previous, CEO leaving. We had COVID and everything else, so staffing numbers and things changed.
Right.
Are they above 5 people now?
I don't think there was a staff of 5.
No.
No, this is.
I wasn't here.
No, they didn't have it. There was only one person there at the time.
Right.
But what was said was that their average staff size is around 5 people.
I think before Amy and Peggy, it was only 2 full-time and then a part-time. So you had 2.5.
Okay, well, previous city managers who said it, so that's what I'm repeating.
Yeah. So if the EDC is gonna go after grant money, and the grant is gonna allow the staff expenses to be covered with the grant, it makes sense. But a lot of times the grants come in and you spend it and you ask for reimbursements, and depending on the grant, what it's being used for, what can be put into it, what can't be put into it. That's how it's gonna have to work down the road if the large staff is gonna continue to be
Right.
supported, let's say.
Mayor Pro Tem Fritz.
Thank you. I think what we're seeing is in fact that our EDC has decided to go all in on the 425 project. And that they're making strategic investments in staff and personnel and marketing to help sell that property. Kind of wish they would have come to us beforehand. But I think that, I think I saw somewhere that they're going to ask for $150,000 transfer in
Well,
each year.
Yeah, so let me kind of explain that. So not in the original budget that was produced, but in the final budget that was sent to me Thursday afternoon. This $150,000 transfer came up. And what it was this, it was $150,000 transfer that the EDC wanted out of the TIFA fund for expenses that were spent in the EDC fund that related to the industrial park. So she gave us a long list of expenses and came up with a percentage of 63% of all the marketing costs that I talked about earlier. And so basically the end result was they wanted to take 150 out of the TIFA fund and get it into the EDC fund to help cover the expenses that the EDC paid for that apparently were really for the TIFA. So, and my thinking would be, well, if they're related to the TIFA to begin with, then the TIFA should have paid for them. And that would have left that money into EDC. And the deficit wouldn't have been so bad. So, and I'm not sure why this wasn't included in her original budget. in the EDC's original budget. If that was the case.
All right. The budget from the 2024 year, do you think there was a miscalculation, like what we had to go back and what you all had to go back and address as far as the grants being in there? So if the 4 million or 4.2, I believe you said, was it 4.2 million that was initially on their budget? Yeah.
Yeah,
If that wasn't already in their revenue and they didn't have a way of actually gaining those funds, was
Right.
that miscalculated? Like
I think
we
it
had
was
to
over
readjust
budget.
it?
I mean, the EDC budgeted 4 point some million, hoping they would get it.
Right,
They didn't. And so they received little under 300,000. And most of that was grants and some interest from investments. And one other local grant of 25,000. But I would have thought that there would have been more grant money.
Yeah.
But if you budget 4 million for grant money, you assume you're gonna get it. Just like we do here, you know? When I gave you that sheet earlier that showed all the projects that we were working on. There was 3 projects towards the end that we have applications in on, but they haven't been approved. So I didn't show them. I only showed what we knew we were gonna get and the projects that that had been approved and are gonna happen. So I think there was an email sent out that Doug clicked on that showed how budgets are supposed to be put together. And one of the recommendations was don't budget for something that you haven't got a letter on or you haven't been approved on. That's their recommendation. Are they telling you that it's completely don't do it? They're not saying that. They're saying they recommend that you don't do that. To me, that's saying don't do it. But that's just my opinion. And I've been a CPA for over 30 years. I've audited companies, I've audited villages, townships, cities. And so I'm used to budgeting. And I know how fund accounting works. And when you budget for 4.5 million and you get 260,000-70,000 in of it, and we're almost at the end of the year, it just doesn't make sense.
Councilwoman Davis, you have a question?
Yes, in terms of the
I
hundred,
feel like, go ahead.
in terms of the $150,000 transfer, is that a transfer as a permanent transfer or is it a loan?
No, she wanted to make it a transfer. So there's 2 ways you can get money from one fund to the other fund.
Mhm.
You can borrow it
Mhm.
temporarily, and that's where you set up a due to and a due from between funds.
Right.
Or you can transfer, it's permanent. Just like we do transfers, just like we had about 3 or 4 funds transfer money into the equipment fund to handle some of those large equipments, pieces of equipment that we were gonna purchase, and we brought it to council, we got approved for it. So that's a permanent, it's not gonna be paid back,
It's not going to be paid.
yeah.
Okay. You know, what we're hearing really isn't pleasant, you know, in terms of, and you're standing there telling us, and we have also heard that this isn't the acceptable procedure. So can you offer a recommendation or suggestion to us as, as council members? Because what we're hearing isn't what we should hear.
Dave,
Go ahead.
we, here in the city, we have department heads. And in this particular case, we sometimes think as the director as a department head, she has a separate board that she answers to. That board is tied into the city through a working agreement, a written working agreement, which was just signed not too long ago. they have the ability to come up with a budget. She reports to that board and gives them a budget, they approve it. That budget is then sent to us. And somewhere, hopefully, a meeting or a compromise can come in between. So to answer your question, is there a recommendation? Probably we need to have good communications between the executive director and the city manager and our staff. There probably has to be good communications between that board and city council. That is how good government should work. That would be my recommendation. We don't want to demonize anybody. We appreciate the efforts of the EDC board. We appreciate Ms. Ammerman moving forward and trying to grow our city. However, it's when we get into the details of budgeting, we need to follow good standard practices. And I think those practices will serve us well because when we're audited, and that is very important that we have a good, clean audit. It shows that we are handling the taxpayers' money in the highest esteem. Also that we're following those guidelines as best practices. So that's what we're trying to do here.
Councilman Lister.
So, a couple of comments. So thank you. I mean, I really appreciate the explanation. I'm learning a lot as we go. I think a lot of us are learning a lot as we go, including the EDC, I would say. So a couple of things I want to say is I think the industrial park is a really important project for the region and for Albion specifically. So I hope we can find solutions to this that are positive, that help us, that show that we as a council, like we said when we ran for office, can learn to work together with other people. So I want our city, and I want our city council, and I want our EDC and our DDA and our Chamber of Commerce. I want us to work together. So we need to find a way to get through this frustration that we're feeling right now. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. And I would say that from how we characterize this, to me, it sounds like the money that we're talking about being transferred in, there was an attempt to detail the thinking behind that, right? And it came out to whatever you said, 150,000 or something like that, 160,000. To me, that sounds like it's one of two things. Either we misattributed it to begin with, and it should have gone into TIFA budget and then TIFA expenditures, and oops, we messed that up. And I mean, with the collective we here. And so we either ought to do that if that's really the right way to account for it, if it's not too late. That's the stuff you guys are great at, and I appreciate that. So I don't know if that's even an option. But if that's the right way to do it, to me, that's the way we ought to do it. You know, if you have to backtrack to do that, then we have to backtrack and do that. And if that's not an acceptable way, or we can't do it for whatever reason, and we can find it acceptable to make the transfer, and we agree that it's generally the logic behind those expenses being TIFA expenses, then I think we should make the change. That's my 2 cents worth on that. I'd like to find a way to bridge this gap. And then another thing, this is a real minor point, but Stacy and I work on a lot of grant funded project in our private company and City of Battle Creek and Community Action Agency. And the grants that they receive for housing improvement, similar to what the EDC has, there is an employee component to that. Now, generally speaking, Jim Stewart doesn't like to look at a grant or submit a grant proposal where employee costs are part of a grant. I'd rather see that personally. I'd rather see that as an operational expense, but sometimes it is a project administrative expense. And so I do think that the EDC does have a number of occasions where these are project related expense, and because they are grant related expense, then there are some ties to it. And I have personal experience with grant money not being provided by the grantor because the project's not closed out, and that does make it hard to do administrative costs sometimes. That was the extent of my comments.
So I think that kind of going to speaking of the TIFA funds, so TIFA funds have to be used specifically for certain things.
detailed. But to request $150,000 to come out of TIFA for things, for projects that not TIFA related, I think that's the issue.
If that's true, I agree, but I thought it was characterized that the logic was that these probably should have been attributed to industrial park related, FIFA related things. If I'm mischaracterizing that, feel free to correct me, but that's what I thought you were saying.
Right,
I was thinking.
I can't make that determination. I'm not at the EDC. I'm not doing the marketing. I'm not spending the money over there. When we get some of those marketing bills in, they're just project numbers. And they're substantial invoices. And I'm assuming it's marketing EDC. That's how I think of it. And so it's hard for me to tell everybody here what's going on over there, because that's not my job. My job is the city. And so a lot of these questions should be answered by the person who's running it.
Yep, thank you, Mayor. Couple things. Jim, what you mentioned about the grants and the administration fees that people attribute to those grants. We do that here at the city as well. We've done that in I believe My Neighborhood grant or the Chill grant that we handed over to the EDC. So we took money out and sent it over there. Also, I want to make sure that this is clarified. The 425 agreement and the 425 development has been something that council has been aware of for multiple years. It's actually represented on that map behind you in those grayish blue areas. And it's also the development and bringing jobs to Albion and all of those different things are called out both in our strategic goals and the comprehensive plan. So the EDC and their board attributing those funds and spending funds to make sure that we develop this site, that we have a $30 million water tower project a mile out of town going into, is them doing what they feel like is supporting what council has already set as the plan for Albion going forward. So I want to make sure you all know that, because I know you guys are new to council. So I just want to bring that to you all and anybody at home that may be listening that may not necessarily be familiar. Now, to David's point, it does seem like we have some things that we have to address going forward. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem French.
Attorney Harkness, maybe I'm a little confused, but we have a fund balance that we could cover that net at the end of 2025 if they don't get grants, right? And so you're concerned about violating the charter because a fund is negative.
I don't know that we would use our fund balance to cover. I don't think we've ever used our fund balance to cover EDC or.
I'm not suggesting that we do, but I'm just wondering if.
Well, I mean, here's why I mentioned that is literally what the charter says is. And this is budget preparation and procedure. It says the proposed expenditures set forth in the budget proposal shall not exceed the expected revenues of the city. Now, for all of the city funds, of course, that has happened on occasion. And the way that we remedy that is we transfer money from our fund balance to satisfy those extra expenditures. So that's why I just mentioned it with the EDC, because the question is, where does that money come from?
Right.
If not from our own fund balance, they're 131 in the hole.
Yeah.
Projected for 2025. I mean, they may not, but
yeah,
that's why I asked. Does it make sense that, and I'm sure, Dave's a CPA. I'm just, the only math that attorneys do is billing. So, I'm sure he's accurate, but the question I ask is, does it make sense to just get it to zero to avoid having a potential charter issue? But the numbers are the numbers. I mean, I just point that out because that's what you guys pay me for.
Counselor Craig.
Okay, is there in the charter, is there a limit or that we could use or play with? So is it unlimited? That's what I hear my colleagues saying, as much as is requested can be given.
So, I mean, by statute, under the EDC statute, they can receive money from basically any source, including the city. In terms of our own fund balance, I defer to Dave what our percentage is. It's pretty high right now. I think it's close to 30% if I'm not.
Oh, it's over that now with the transfer.
Yeah, so it's, yeah, with the Maple Grove and all that, I mean, I'm sure it's huge, but the state likes to see a fund balance in excess of 15%.
Yeah. And remember, when we're talking about a good governmental accounting, it's each fund needs to stand on its own. They're like little business A, business B, business C. And here we got close to what, 20-25 funds. So we try not to have to grab from one fund to help another fund. As long as we don't have to. We don't want to make that our practice. Each fund should stand on its own. Unless there's something like happened this year where the equipment fund went out and purchased a bunch of equipment because we needed it. And so it didn't have the money, it didn't have the fund balance to cover all that. So we had to ask other funds to contribute. But that needs to be brought to council, it needs to be approved and so forth, because it's over $15,000. And even if it's a transfer in or out, it needs to be approved. So, but each fund should stand on its own. And that's how fund accounting works. But there's times when something may happen in a given fund where it's out of the norm. And we need to help that fund out by doing a permanent transfer or temporary loaning the money until they get back on their feet, and then we give it back.
I'm sorry for the ignorant questions, but so is the EDC fund something that the city of Albion would be responsible to replenish? I understand we're doing the bookkeeping, and I can see why that would be frustrating because it's really just the tail end bookkeeping, right? But
Yeah, right, well,
but are we responsible? I mean, we've been talking like there's an oversight and the city of Albion would be responsible for filling that void. I don't think that's true, is it? I mean, it's a separate fund. So it's separate from the city of Albion, or is it?
yes.
What a loaded question, Counselor.
I didn't mean it to be loaded. It's just.
So, no. So there's a lot of ins and outs here. I mean, the EDC, Tifa, Brownfield, they're all separate legal entities from the city.
Right.
But there's interplay in the sense that we're basically a fiduciary for those entities. We handle their money, we distribute their money. There's an interlocal agreement between the city, EDC, Tifa, Brownfield, to provide them with certain services for accounting services, management of their money, et cetera, et cetera. EDC bylaws require that the city approve their budget before we approve it. They're part of our audit. So in a sense, we are on the hook in terms of how the state views certain things. But in a sense, we're also not. How do you like that for an attorney answer? Yes and no.
Well, it's kind of,
Yeah.
that's tracking with what I think I'm hearing. So can I draw a parallel? So the DDA proposed a budget and I'm on the DDA. And we think we're gonna have more money than we have actually attributed to us at this point. And it's a much smaller amount. But so we put forth that budget and you can see if we look at the line item of something like 22 over. But we do have a pretty high expectation that we'll be able to obtain that money. And at the same time, the city, I'm not gonna get the terms right, so sorry, Dave, but if we needed to, then we could pull that money in. But I don't understand, is the DDA more tied to the city where we would do that than the EDC is, or is it the same kind of thing?
I would say it's the same kind of thing. The DDA by statute, like the EDC and the other entities, is a separate legal entity. I mean, in a purely hypothetical world, the DDA and the city could be on other sides, separate sides of the fence, and one could be suing the other. I mean, you wouldn't see that in an entity. In a single entity, so they're two separate, legal separate entities. In fact, the DDA statute says it's a separate corporate entity that can, and I quote, sue and be sued. Just like the EDC statute says the same thing about the EDC, so. They are separate to a degree, but they're political sub bodies to, in a sense, of the city. I mean, I think what ultimately the manager and the finance director have said here, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, is, I mean, from a purely accounting standpoint, it makes the most sense to be conservative and follow best practice, and that's probably not putting the city in a situation where it's gonna have to fund another deficient, and I don't know if I'm misphrasing that, but
No, you're correct. So we're talking about titles or organizations. The DDA is an authority subordinate to city council. It was created by city council by ordinance. In this particular case with the EDC, we have a working agreement. They are basically a standalone corporation. But we have an agreement that we help one another out. We oversee their books. We help them administratively. At the same time, they're carrying out a function of marketing and helping develop the city. But there is a difference, and the DDA is again an authority. The EDC is a corporation. So they have a little bit more autonomy, but we're all supposed to be working together for the betterment of the community. So to go back as far as your original question on, there was a shortage on the DDA. That doesn't happen every year. And what will end up happening, we will go through an audit, and the DDA will be part of the city's audit. It will be identified that there was a shortage this year. However, we will take a look at how often, what was that shortage about? How much was it compared to the rest of the budget? The Department of Treasury might respond back and say, hey, we're a little concerned about it. We'll write a letter back. This is how the auditors do it, that there was no significant finding of a deficit. We will have that corrected in 2025. That's usually how it works. So.
Yeah, that's not much of a deficit. It'll be corrected
Well, and-
very next year.
And we're budgeting that anyway, and it's not an actual.
Councilman Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Does the DDA have a separate accountant? Or does that fall on you?
No, I do all the accounting for the DDA.
Okay.
Yeah. I do all the accounting for every fund.
Got you. So with us having appropriations exceeding the revenues, are we able to approve that budget as well, or do we have to make an adjustment?
I'm just telling you what the charter says. I mean, at the budgeting, I leave to this gentleman and this gentleman. I'm just telling you. The language of the charter just says the proposed expenditures set forth in the budget proposal shall not exceed the expected revenues.
No,
That's an easy fix for, like I said, for the city funds, because we take some from the fund balance and even it out. So realistically, it's zeroed out.
Right.
Um,
and does that say per fund or is that the overall city?
it says the budget proposal.
Yeah, so it's overall.
I think it's overall.
Now we see it's shown in multiple areas here in the special revenues fund. The street improvement, 1.4 million, revenue 3.4, appropriations 2 million, deficit. Now, that's the grant funding, right?
That's the bond sale.
The bond sale,
Yeah.
right?
And on that, I specifically called our auditor and wanted to make sure that the way I was gonna handle it was the way it was supposed to be. And he said, you show it as revenue. You'll have a surplus that year and you'll use it up next year. So,
So there seems to be appearing in a couple different areas.
Yeah, I think that's the overall city budget, everything together.
Probably right.
So if you were to add up all the revenues and all the appropriations, you wouldn't be a negative for every fund together.
Mayor Pro Tem French.
So just in a way to sort of move the process along, because we know that there are opportunities for budgets to be realigned with reality. And EDC director has made comment that, at previous meetings that, how often do you do that, right? Because we push back on putting millions of dollars into a budget with the assumption that they might get grants. I would say that we could move forward with this budget with an understanding that in the first quarter of next year, that deficit better be accounted for in the long-term plan to make that go away. And that we could just basically keep abreast of what the EDC is spending and make sure that they are doing their due diligence to try to make that 200,000 or whatever it is, deficit go away over the year. And if they get a grant that helps pay for that, fantastic. And if they don't, then they will be held responsible for making sure that they cut the appropriate amounts so that their budget comes out at the end of 2025 at zero. I think that's how we had planned it for the grants anyway. So if this is a bit more of a deficit, we can make that happen.
I think that's a great idea. We could bring the financials every month and take a look at them and see if it's improving or if it's not. When you look at the 2024, and I don't want to go to 2025 unless if we go to 2024, we look at the actual numbers that were projected. The 2025 budget looks similar to 2024. Almost exact. $420,000 deficit for 2025. And then for 2024, actual numbers. 415 or 418,000. Nothing's going to change unless we get some grant money in to cover the overhead. Because in the EDC fund, I have separated in departments certain grants. The chill grant has been separated. And that is fully covered by grant money. But it's the overhead that we're talking about. There's also a couple other departments down there, the My Hope, and I think one other one. There's not been a lot of My Hope that has been put into that department quite yet. So I'm assuming it hasn't been spent. I could be wrong. Maybe some of it's up in the overhead, but there's no way of me knowing that.
David, on this sheet here. The My Hope, it doesn't show the actual balance of the chill grant, not the My Hope grant, but the chill grant. It doesn't show the balance of the chill grant. I thought it was it 500,000 before we took
Okay, so we're
the,
on page 3 of 4
Mhm.
of the 244 fund.
yeah, so shouldn't that on theirs be represented as 400,000?
So the total amount projected to be spent by the EDC is $561,899.
What page on?
Page 3 of 4 of the 244 account. It's attached to, I had Sonia attached the 4 budgets that were redone.
244 account.
So 244 fund, page 3 of 4 up on
Yep.
top.
And you're saying this, and keep in mind, I'm asking about the chill grant.
This is the chill grant.
Okay, 732.
No, the chill grant is shown in the CDBG fund of the city. Because it's between the city and the Michigan Department of Housing Authority.
They're just administering it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Gotcha.
just
Okay,
administering.
that's why it doesn't show up on
They're
there.
a third party, but the My Hope grant was between the EDC and the state, basically.
Okay,
So that's shown in their fund.
now it's showing as a deficit in their fund as well, right?
Overall,
On the 732 appropriations,
yeah, those are total expenses.
right?
But up on top, you'll see revenue to cover the grant money that's shown on top of that fund.
Nah, can you show me
Page 1
Page 1
of the 4.
page 1?
Yeah, see that top line number of
The state or federal grants?
the, the state grants? That
591,670.
is covered dollar for dollar.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay,
And
Makes
that's
sense.
the way it should be,
yeah. So then, yeah, I got you.
all right? But the key here is this, when you look at this page 2. Department 728. This is the EDC overhead. Page 2.
Okay,
This needs to be covered by grants every year. Somehow.
okay,
This has the. Where's it here? I mean, this is basically all of her salary and wages. She's got professional fees, contracted fees. A lot of that is the marketing portion of it.
gotcha.
But that's the key here. Going forward, we want to make sure that this is going to be covered by either a grant or some other way, if we're going to keep this staff. As you go through to page 3, then we start separating out the grants that we know of that have been approved and we're going to spend money on. The My Hope grant, the My Neighborhood grant, and the chill. Now, the chill expenses are her expense for the 50,000 that we're gonna pay her to administer the grant.
Right,
We don't cover these expenses like overhead, because these apparently relate to the grant. These are people working on the grant. So that these are wages to help administer the grant.
it's budgeted against the fee that they charge.
Right.
Yeah,
And then up on top in the revenue, you'll see where there's administrative fees.
yep,
All right, those are the monies that she's gonna get for administering the grant. So that's gonna help cover the chill grant salaries and wages that are in that department.
got it.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion and support for level 25 budget? City Clerk Domingo?
Councilmember Reed,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Dr. French,
Yes,
Williams,
Yes,
and Mayor Snyder.
Yes.
Do I have a motion to approve the 24 amended?
so moved.
for,
All right, so we started with a 2024 original budget. Part of the budget process is to project where we think we're gonna be at year end. And that's these numbers here, rounded off. So for 2024, our revenues are shown as 10,887,485. A lot of that had to do with the normal stuff that we take in, plus a large transfer from the Albion or the Maple Grove property sale. And then we have our overhead, all of our departments. And then so we have quite revenues over appropriation number that will go straight into the fund balance after we close out 2024. And a lot of that still has to do with the transfer in. I was checking my numbers earlier. There's still about 1,150,000 that's waiting to be transferred in from the Albion Trust. So that'll make it close to 4 million. So that's the general fund. Then we have our special revenue funds. Again, I want to zero in on the street improvement fund. That's going to show a large amount of revenues over expenditures, because next year we're going to spend all that out. That's caused by the bond sale for the money we got up front. Those are the special revenues. Debt service funds, there's 5. For 2024, there'll only be 3 left, 2 of them were cleared out. And these are just set up to handle the principal and interest payments on the debt that was originally produced. And the new one this year again was the MTF bond series 2024. That's for the street portion of the water system project that's being run through the street improvement fund. So every year, the street improvement fund will transfer money into Fund 362, the MTF bonds, to handle the interest and principal every year. This year, we got lucky because we got bond premium because they were sold a little higher than what they were going for, what the par value was. Enterprise funds this year came out pretty good. But again, we need that every year because we have to handle the debt associated with all the projects in both those funds. We have the water system project for the water tower and the water fund, and we have a brand new sewer system that's about 6 million spent so far on that whole project. Bills are coming in from the contractors every month for a little under $1 million. And hopefully that'll be done by the end of 2025. So we need a good profit every year in our enterprise funds to cover the principal and interest payments on the debt that produced those projects.
Mhm.
And again, this will all amend the original budget. And we're down to our internal service fund. This is the equipment pool fund. We had a nice revenue over appropriations there, but again, that is because we needed that to produce the equipment, the purchase of the equipment. And again, that's shown up in the balance sheet and will be depreciated over years. You won't see that next year. I think in the budget for next year, we're going to be 16,000 to the good. This was kind of a different year from the equipment fund because we purchased so many pieces of equipment to upgrade everything. And then our other funds. These are what we were talking about. Most of them came out okay, except for the EDC. And then we have our trust funds. Actual numbers or projected numbers that will amend the budget to. And again, the public safety came out great. The cemetery trust was in a negative, but over $166,000 were spent for improvements to buildings, additions that were done, and land improvements, and a lot of good stuff that was done to the cemeteries in total. So that is the amended budget numbers.
Mayor Tim French.
So with regard to the EDC fund, how much is left in their fund balance? Are they going to use that to pay this negative number?
Okay, at the beginning of the year, they had 607,000. And the last time I checked, their total assets were 607,000. Last time I checked, it was down to 172. I think it's a little lower now. And so their fund balance is probably going to be 420,000 lower than it was at the first of the year.
Right. I'm just looking at a 234,000 in the red that we've got.
Which one? The EDC?
Yeah.
It had $418,000
Wait,
projected.
I'm on page 40. Go to the.
Oh, okay, you're looking at the actual. Yeah, all right, so
Page 41, Andy.
I got it.
Page 41 in mine is a board position of.
You're looking at you're looking at an old version.
So are we looking at this, Sandy? That's right here.
No. We had a different come Thursday. And we're looking at today.
Mine. Yep. I've got so many papers on my tabletop.
Well, that's how my office looks.
No, I get it. I get it. So they're 400,000 to the red.
Yeah, $418,000 negative. So that will be paid by fund balance. That will reduce fund balance dollar for dollar in the EDC.
Right, it's gonna reduce their fund balance to negative $300,000. Sounds like, or 250.
I don't think so.
No, we said it was.
No,
You said it was 170.
no, that's what their cash were, or that's what their assets were.
Oh, okay.
So, whatever their fund balance was, I think it's still gonna be positive at the end of 2024.
Okay,
It's
that's
gonna be $418,000 lower.
it's coming out of their fund balance, not the rest.
No,
Okay,
but think of it as, okay, the beginning fund balance was a certain amount. And now this year, after the year's up, if these numbers come true, right? There'll be that in the hole. But again, I used her numbers that she told me that were gonna be spent on the chill grant by the end of the year. I don't know what's gonna be spent. I have no idea. I went with her numbers. That's what she budgeted. So if it comes in lower than what she budgeted, then the number will be not so bad.
Is the chill grant reflective in there?
The chill grant is shown in the city's CDBG.
Right. So it's down towards the bottom, not in the 244.
It's not shown in the 244.
It shows in the 251.
251.
Okay.
Yep. Because again, that is between the city and the state. The My Hope grant, which is in the, or excuse me, I think I misspoke. The My Hope grant is what she budgeted 500 and some thousand for. I'm sorry.
Right.
So we're down to page, what, 3 of 4 of the 244. So this is the My Hope grant. And so far she's spent through 11/30, the EDC has spent 335,000 and some change. She says by the end of the year, she's gonna spend 561,899. And that is right here, this schedule.
Gotcha.
Because we try to separate each project out so we can keep track of the cost. So I budgeted enough to cover that projected number dollar for dollar. But again, we need to, to really get this to go the right way down the road, we need to take the overhead page, which is Department 728, and make sure we cover that every year.
Clarification, so, Mr. Chair, you were explaining, the relationship between the DDA and the city and the EDC and the city. And I appreciate that. It helps me out. I think that explains why I'm feeling like if, I'll say it a positive way. If you were spending money on the budget and we didn't like the way it was going, you and we have a direct line. But the EDC board is who's over the spending and the monitoring of the budget for the EDC, right?
Correct.
So if we have things that we want changed or monitored, I mean, we're gonna monitor it because we see it. We're gonna see it every month. But wouldn't we be taking our concerns or questions to the EDC board?
That
Or the
would
EDC
probably
director?
be, yes.
It feels like our hands are tied in a lot of this, and it's because they are. Right?
They operate with some autonomy.
Okay, any other questions? City Clerk Domingo.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
French,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Reed, and Mayor Snyder.
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve of the reappointment of Mary Slater to the Arts Commission?
Support.
Any discussion? Questions? Yep. Councilman Wade.
Mary Slater's great. I support this. We've become fond of each other over the course of this past year and it was by happenstance, we met each other. She thought I was somebody else and then I told her who I was. She was like, oh, I was just at the meeting the other day. I was like, all right, Mary, what you need help with? So she's had me moving chairs and other stuff. But she's great and Mary, she does a great job. Juanita in the back, she does a great job as well. And the Arts Commission is definitely making us proud here at the city. So I definitely support this.
I concur.
I'll just say, I also agree and support. She's a doer.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes, I agree.
Councilmember Frost,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes,
French,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
and Mayor Snyder.
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve the purchase of the new EDPS vehicle?
So
support.
Deputy Chief Kern?
Good evening, council. This is part of the 2025 budget approved. Part of that approval was for us to purchase a patrol car. We do that every year with state bid price. This one's going to be a 2024 Dodge Durango. They actually have one on the lot. So we want to grab that like ASAP instead of waiting 20 weeks or more to order one and then still have it outfitted. This way this should be outfitted here pretty soon, and then it'll be out on the road quickly. This vehicle came in at 44,600. 44,628. And then we're asking for roughly up to 25,000 in additional funds to outfit it. That's all the computer equipment, camera systems, the prisoner transport system that's in the back of it, and all the radios and stuff like that. So with that, this came in a little bit lower than the trucks and the Explorers that we looked at before. So far we hear pretty good reviews on it, on Durango, so.
Any questions for Deputy Chief Kern?
it's not a question. I just want to say the letter was really good. It helped us to understand where you come from, what you considered. So it made reviewing this a lot easier. Thank you.
He knows the tricks.
They're shaking us down all year, Jim. Nah.
City Clerk Domingo. Councilmember Davis.
Yes.
French.
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Frost,
Yes.
and Mayor Snyder.
Yes. Next is our discussion on the resolution for the bylaws for the EDC. So. Interim city manager, I don't know if you want to
Sure.
do this or.
And during our study session, it was decided that this was going to be taken off the agenda. We were going to have discussion, that's correct. Okay, so let me just explain. There was the introduction to amend the bylaws and which have to be approved by council. Because it included the inclusion of Sheridan Township, Parma Township, and I believe, and Albion Township supervisors. And one of the questions that came up is that what was the relationship between the EDC, the city, and those other entities, especially if they were non-contiguous to the city? I believe Councilman Stewart wanted to talk about this. Mayor Pro Tem wanted to table this pending further information. And so we're at a discussion mode at this point. I just wanted to give some background on that. And so I welcome any questions or comments council might want to address to the administration.
That you attorney are.
Or, no, or opinion.
Mayor Pro Tem French.
So one of my biggest concerns is that we are changing bylaws. at the request of the EDC executive director, because she feels that having their voting membership on our EDC will help her case for the 425 project. And I want to remind council that the EDC does a whole lot more than the 425 project. So as we develop the existing industrial park, as we address education and all the things that were part of the vision that the EDC put out for us, the executive director reviewed for us, none of that, with the exception of the 425 project, applies to the townships that she is asking to represent the city's economic development. So the fact that one of them personally said, I don't want to be on it, suggests to me that the townships are not necessarily necessary as voting members of our EDC to support our 425 project. They can write a letter that accompanies every grant proposal, every proposal that goes, or case for support that goes to any developing company that wants to build a factory of enormous size on that property, whatever it might be. Letters of support from township supervisors is all that's needed. We have solicited those sorts of things when we've developed projects on the west, when we've created programs in education. When KCC came out west to create the Eastern Academic Center, the township was involved in that decision, the city was involved in that decision, and we elicited and solicited letters of recommendation for those projects. So what I see this is that we don't need to change our bylaws to accommodate one project that may or may not happen. Because once we change the bylaws, then we have to create this idea that we're going to change the bylaws every time some situation changes. And bylaws are created to create a level of permanence and stability and continuity, regardless of who sits in those positions of authority. So I would say that, yes, the 425 project is a huge egg that's in our basket that we want to fund and support, but we don't need to give voting privileges for our EDC if that is only one of many, many projects that the EDC does. So I would suggest that we find people on the board or in the community who want to serve on that board that share the vision of the EDC as a whole entity, not members of the community who support the 425 project. There it is.
Councilor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Andy, as well. I get where you're coming from in saying that why add these additional people that can vote on everything that doesn't have anything to do with them? So in that scenario, additional feedback as to how to address the possible concerns of the other township supervisors who have interest in these properties that they currently own that we would have to annex into basically the city of Albion, basically taking ownership of them. Not to mention the fact that we'll be putting infrastructure throughout those different townships. What would be the suggestion as far as them being able to have inclusion in what goes on, or somewhat of a say in the 425? And it doesn't necessarily have to be this. I understand your point. Is there a suggestion that you will make as far as that goes?
Sure. So so I think that as the current board sits, there are 8 members. And it's a public meeting. And official documents from those township supervisors can be brought to the EDC expressing their great disfavor or opposition to some component to it. But the 425 agreement has happened, right? That's the whole point. And so if they have concerns, those parcels that are not part of the 425 project, they can voice those concerns. The owners of those properties can refuse to sell. They're under no compulsion to sell to the EDC. And so those meetings are public. They can come to a meeting and express their disapproval of the project. But 2 votes, 3 votes is not going to change the mind of the EDC. If it's something that unanimously, not even unanimously, they support. So their vocal opposition, you would hope that the EDC board would take those into consideration, whether they have a vote or not, because it's going to impact them. But the 4.25 agreement has already happened, so.
No, I definitely understand where you're coming from and saying that. I do also want to make sure that we keep in mind and consider the obstacles that other municipalities have faced when expanding into 425 agreements. You know, the city to the west of us is having issues as far as feedback and different things like that. The 425 and the support that it needs from us as council will determine the future of Albion in many ways. In many ways, especially the infrastructure, and we know how much this is costing us as taxpayers here in the city, from our water bills going up to everything else. So I mean, we definitely need to support it going forward, but I definitely appreciate your feedback on it.
Attorney Harris.
So obviously, you know, our office doesn't have a dog in this fight, but, you know, some things to consider in aside from modifying bylaws to permanently appoint people. One thing that the EDC statute does allow is for a project area to be designated and 2 additional directors to serve on the board specific to that project. They only vote on that project and they serve for the duration of that project. So that is an option that exists statutorily. That might be an alternative for council and the EDC to consider, rather than appointing 2 township supervisors to sit on a board that does this thing for the entire city, as opposed to just a project area that would affect the townships. That's one option. You know, the other thing, and the city manager can probably speak more to this than I can, a 425 is not the only vehicle to basically accomplish development there. The city might consider doing a franchise agreement with the townships to provide utility services that wouldn't require a 425. The thing with a 425 is, and Councilman Williams kind of touched on this, generally what happens at the end of the 425 is that the property's annexed into the city. The complicating factor with this is we're talking about hypothetically having a 425, not just with Sheridan, but Parma. Parma's in another county. Another assessor, another equalization director, that's going to be, to characterize it as complicated would be an understatement. I'm not saying it's not doable. Doesn't happen very often, and probably for obvious reasons, because once you cross a county boundary, it's not as straightforward and simple as a 425 between 2 adjoining municipalities. So I throw that out there for as food for thought for the city. You know, but no matter what, I mean, putting in that infrastructure out there, and I tell you this from experience because I'm currently dealing with it in one of my other municipalities. You know, aside from maybe road construction, putting in water and sewer is probably the next most expensive thing. I mean, to run it, you know, and we don't have Elmer, I don't think Elmer's here tonight, but I mean, to run water and sewer a quarter mile is, you know, assuming you don't need a lift station, is like $1 million. So I mean, there's going to be a hefty price tag associated with this, and generally what you see in a 425 agreement, other than saying, you know, we're required to provide police service and you know, code enforcement and all that, is putting in water and sewer infrastructure, and that's got to be something the city considers when you take on something like that, because where's that money going to come from?
But that's actually where the water tower is going.
Right. I'm not talking about the water tower. I'm talking about the water mains and the sewer mains and the sanitary mains.
Right.
I mean, that's,
Lines themselves.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
not the service lines between the business and the main, but the mains. I mean, those are like, that's what I was talking about. It's like $1 million, assuming you don't need a lift station for the sewer, it's like $1 million for a quarter mile of that.
No,
Director,
definitely.
were you gonna redact some information?
Well, we're dealing with 2 separate issues here. One is the discussion on the bylaws for the EDC. And if you give me just a few minutes, Can I just demonstrate? So years ago, there was this natural conflict between municipalities, between general law townships and cities. Why? Because cities had the utilities. And as DEQ became more involved, it became more apparent that the requirements of the old days of water or wells and septic were gone. You couldn't service a manufacturer with wells and septic. So back in the eighties, when 425 was created by the state legislature, and that's what it is, Public Act 425, it was designed to take the fight out of annexation. Again, there's about 3 ways to transfer property into a city. And one is through a franchise, or you extend utilities, a franchise agreement, 425 or annexation. This area here, this is what is a 425 agreement now. Now, usually, and they're for no more than 50 years, and usually at the expiration, because the city is making the investment, most of the time what ends up happening is that it comes back into the city. It is permanently annexed as part of our corporate limits. That's important to point out because the State Boundary Commission says it has to be proportionate and it has to be contiguous. In this particular case, when we went in and we did a 425, we left a space between our existing city limits and this 425 area. Now, that being said, some of these 425 agreements that the city of Albion has, the Sheridan Township and Albion Township, go back into the 90s. What we should probably do is, with the assistance of our city attorney, he and I, and of course, city council, should take a look at our existing 425 and think about maybe finding out what is good and what is bad, and maybe reapproaching the townships to talk about those deficiencies. Why? Because if development really does start coming here, how would this ever come back into our city limits?
So I can answer that for you. The 425 has been expanded. That's an old photo.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been expanded. That's an old photo and about that, it's not too much I want to get into because I know a lot of that is stuff that they gotta take care of.
One thing I did talking to our engineer today is when we had read one of those 425 agreements, the utilities then become the ownership of the township. If you ask DEQ, we are the water operator. So they're getting their source from the city of Albion, but who's to control this by ordinance regulation? On backflow prevention, on the way that they use water. So there is in conflict some of the things that we have to do by statute and by regulation. That the 425s that are in place need to be readdressed.
Yes, and to your point, being that these conversations have been ongoing since I've been on council for the last 3 years, a lot of that should have been addressed before you got here. Not to be offensive, but common sense would say, well, what is a 425 and how do we make it work? This 425 agreement, like you mentioned, dating back to the 90s, that's over 25 years, right? So if we've known that, it should have been addressed previously. And what we've been lacking and what we've been missing is a unification between the office here at City Hall. And by the office, I mean the office of the city manager and the EDC CEO. Because if the development is what's going to spark change around here and move us forward, then why are we moving so slowly to get to it? Again, Doug, I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying in general, this is what has been holding up the development of us moving forward as a city because we can't figure out basic things like, okay, how do we drive development in the city of Albion?
And so. Again, I mean, I was.
Yeah, we're on the same page.
Yeah, I was hired for my looks.
Not at all, dude. Not at all. No, I'm joking.
The idea is that. I'm saying that we have an opportunity now of all this development. And we might be dealing with antiquated documents that might need to be amended to reflect the realities of what could happen.
You got my support, dude.
And so I would suggest that the city attorney and I work on this, examine those existing documents and come back. Go back to what we were talking about and as Colin had suggested, to talk about expanding into another county that has, and that's what we have here in the state, county equalization. Not regional equalization, but county equalization. It would make assessing a nightmare. It just would. And there would be people affected in these areas that could be impacted very negatively. So I think it's critical that now is the time for he and I, and with the support of council, to dissect and re-examine our existing agreements.
Right, and that also with the EDC CEO and maybe the president as well, so that you can be made abreast of the things that they've already done, where they are currently, and then we can address the elephant in the room, as you said, the.
Changes.
Again, the EDC is our.
No, I fully understand that, Doug.
Marketing component. The agreements are actually between Albion Township, Sheridan Township, and the city of Albion. That's what we need to focus on.
Yeah, me mentioning that was bringing you up to speed as far as where they are currently. That was the extent of me mentioning that. Yeah.
That's all I have at this time, Mayor. If anybody else has any other questions.
Do we have any other questions for either our attorney or our city manager?
You know, I don't have a question, but it seems like before we can approve. You know, there's a lot that needs to be done. Approve these bylaws. There are some changes that need to be made in there.
I believe so. I believe that we need to take a look at the basics of the transfer of property,
Right.
the expiration dates, everything,
Mhm.
and see how we can properly grow this. We do not want to leave a legacy of a problem for a future city council and administration.
Exactly.
Right. Right.
Attorney Hartness.
Well, like I said, I mean, the council, obviously, the concept of a 4-2-5 has been pitched around, but that's not the only avenue. And so my suggestion to council would be, it's a little bit of cart before the horse. Until council figures out which direction you go, because you may very well decide, you know, EDC may decide, hey, maybe it's easier to designate it as a project area and appoint township supervisors as those additional board members for that project area for the duration of the project. That can very easily be done.
But if they do it that way,
They don't change the bylaws.
they don't change the bylaws, but
There's a
can,
provision in place.
you know, suppose, I mean, from my understanding, EDC can have up to 11 members, right? Suppose we add members to the EDC board, right? So are you saying that there should be space available on the board for these projects, or
No,
how?
it's a separate project.
Yeah,
team.
yeah,
So
project
they're
team.
not on
So
the
this,
board.
okay,
Well,
they will be allowed to vote.
so let me clarify. They're not, so a traditional EDC board member votes on anything that comes before the
Right.
EDC board.
Right. Yeah.
If a project area is designated, those EDC board members serve only in respect to that project area. They only vote on things that
Okay.
affect the project area.
Right,
Anything else, I mean, they're free to attend anything else because it's a public meeting, but their authority is limited to the designated project area and those matters coming before the EDC regarding that project.
So the EDC board has to be very alert to the number that are on the board. So you don't exceed the allowed number that can be on the board, right? Because of these projects.
So the project board is separate from.
Oh, this is a separate board.
Absolutely.
No, no,
No, it's,
no.
it's an addition.
It's,
a membership.
they're board members, but they serve in a very limited capacity.
So they don't count towards the 11.
So they don't.
That's my understanding.
They don't count toward the total number on.
Because the total member votes on everything.
Right,
These guys only vote on the project area. That would be my interpretation. I'm happy to look into that to see if that's come up elsewhere. But that would be my interpretation.
it's an option.
That I could.
Councilman Stewart.
It sounds like we're coming to a consensus. So one thing I want to add is, when Mayor Pro Tem French started, we were talking about how we need more information, and I still think that, it would be. I think we need to understand a little bit better the rationale of why. It was proposed to go in this direction, and there may be some back and forth that there's other options, but I think it would be smart for us to try to understand better the rationale.
And I would like to invite members of the EDC board to be in attendance at that meeting. The board runs that organization, so it'd be nice to have board representation and getting information.
Just keep it under a quorum.
Well, right, I mean, the board president, for example, the board chair, right, or president, whatever they call.
We could,
Well, I mean, it's still an open meeting, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying you don't want to have a quorum of their board, otherwise you'd have to notice it up as a public meeting for them too.
I understand.
I mean, we could
That
have
shouldn't be a problem.
A joint meeting.
a joint.
A joint
session.
meeting.
We could also send back the recommendation of what Cullen suggested.
I'm just throwing, I'm not suggesting.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good.
I'll take that back, yeah.
I'm saying it's an option.
Discussed previously.
You could do a 425, you could do a franchise agreement, it could be designated as a project area. There's a variety of different things you could do. I just didn't want council to think 425 is your
It's the
only act.
thing, right.
There are alternatives, and that the project area one allows you to basically accomplish a similar goal without having to modify the bar.
Right.
And that's what I was speaking to.
And that may have already been considered. We just don't know. And that's why I'd like to have the extended conversation with it. And I do want to also add that with EDC, I don't think of EDC, this is where you guys can correct me again. I don't think of the EDC as being the city of Albion EDC. I think of it as Albion's Regional Economic Development Corporation, and maybe somebody take me offline on this and correct me if I'm off on that, but I know the DDA's role, it's easy because I can see the limits drawn on a map, but I thought the EDC was more of a regional entity. So I'm not
It
surprised.
is in the absence of anything else.
Makes sense. So I would say that I think it's a regional entity. So.
All right, well, good discussion, appreciate it. Future agenda items. Anything else I'd like to see in?
It'll be January. So we got.
Attorney Harris.
So, believe it or not, we're due for the city attorney evaluation.
That's right.
When do we need to have this done by?
Well, so I will get you. There's nothing pressing, and obviously it can wait until January, February. I will get you a self-evaluation. And then I'd have to pull up that resolution, but I think council usually gets, I think, 2 weeks
Mhm.
to do their evaluation, then we can do it at a closed session thereafter. So why don't we say I'll have mine to council by the end of the year, and then if council can get theirs in 2 weeks after that, and we can look at doing it maybe the second meeting in January.
Okay.
And that's it. Yeah,
There was something, but you'll bring them later.
Any other agenda items?
I still would like to follow up with the sidewalk idea in terms of setting some goals or at least some priorities regarding sidewalk or repairs, I guess. So,
Are we gonna get our city manager consultant to come to a meeting? Search.
He was willing to do so tonight. I told him that I would, provide you with the profile questionnaire.
Right.
Yes, at some point he will come.
Right, so if this is to him by the end of the month, right?
well, he said the 30th, that's what we
Yeah.
agreed on. Yeah. So,
The first meeting would be the sixth.
I can have him here.
I was thinking.
Okay.
All right, any other items?
Not at the moment.
Public comment, if there's anybody in the gallery that would like to stand and address council, you may do so at this time. Stand up.
she's ready to go.
So ready to. Council, I just wanted to say thank you for your support this entire year for both public services and public works. And providing all the equipment that you have. For both public safety and public works. But nothing would be able to be done without Director Clark.
Yeah.
He finally let me back in his office. Cool.
That's because all the money's gone.
But he has done a phenomenal job in my 26 years plus of being here. I've never seen this machine run so well. And it's because of that man. So, and his staff. So, thank you all very much for a wonderful year, and I hope that we'll do a good job for you all.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you, Dave.
Thank you.
Director Kurlock.
Kudos to you, sir.
Smattering.
Not a level of applause. Yeah.
Chief Phipps, before you walk away.
Chief Kip.
I think Chief Phipps,
Oh, yes.
do you wanna let council know where you were earlier today?
Today, yes,
Uh-oh.
Yeah, an update.
we had, I was going to, we had graduation today, Keller Community College, hosted academy. Typically, we've used, Washington County or Lansing Community College. This time KCC hosted one, which they have in the past. But they had 30 cadets from various departments around our area, southern part of the state. We, sent Robert Haas, call him RJ. We been about 6 months. So they completed the academy today. They have their tests for their MCOs tomorrow morning. So we were told once they take that test, they'll know if they'll pass within 10 minutes, hopefully, which is a little different than in years past. So hopefully we'll find out pretty quick. And then as soon as we find out that he passed, because I'm sure he will start field training on Wednesday. And also Chief Kipp's, former Chief Kipp, his son also graduated as well. So he's starting. I know.
Cannot be done all.
So he also graduated as well. So we're very happy for both of them. Chief Kipp got to pin his badge on Michael as well, too, which was great, which was really good.
That's great.
Is he joining us?
Eaton Rapids.
Eat rapids. Yeah.
So
Someday.
do we have new recruits
So we
that
have-
may be joining
We have one.
one?
Yep, RJ's the one that we sent, so he will start his field training soon. And then it'll go through the fire academy in October, so luckily he doesn't have to hold double duties. Cause that can be a pain sometimes, but he's gonna start police and then he'll go into fire this fall and then. He can go both ways.
Perfect.
But, yep, it was pretty good. So, and it's always good that we have a resource that is just 30 minutes away instead of sending them 45 minutes to Ann Arbor, 45 minutes to Lansing. Good weather, bad weather, you never know, but it's awesome that KCC has that there, and I think we're looking to utilize it a lot more.
Thanks.
Perfect.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
City managers report, do we have a report?
Yes, a couple things, Mayor. Since my month tenure here, one of the things that I've come to learn and appreciate about Albion is the quality of staff that we have in this organization. As such, as you probably are well aware, in both the public and private sector, hiring and retaining employees is becoming quite a challenge. I spoke to Dave today, and one of the things that I would like to pursue while I'm here is a wage and salary review. So that we can find out for each, title for each position, whether or not we're being competitive and being able to retain and employ new people. I think it's critical. We need to use that as a management tool. So I'm going to be pursuing that with all vigor. The next thing is, water meters. Staff and I have been meeting with different suppliers. We really would like to pursue an automated water meter reading system. That would probably save us time and money and accuracy. The same would go for our citizens. We'd like to go from a quarterly billing to a monthly. It will make everybody a little bit easier to pay a monthly bill rather than have 3 months due at one time, especially during the holidays. So we believe that a automated, and we would be able to keep better track of water leakage and usage, so, and by class. The next thing is, and I had already written this down, is that Cullen and I are going to take a look at our existing 425 agreements, as well as any other agreements we have with the surrounding communities. We think we need to make sure that we're in touch with what we should have, as opposed to what was done 20, 30 years ago. That's all I have here.
All right. Good. Any questions for our city manager? Yes.
Will you educate us a little bit when you get through your study?
Of course. Yes, yes, I will.
If he's-
Yes, I will.
Council member comments. Attorney Burns.
So, council may have noticed the gentleman sitting in the front row here. This is John Fowler. He, replaced Lars when he left my office, so he's the assistant city attorney. I asked him to come tonight because I assured him it would be a short meeting.
Sorry, dude.
About that.
And maybe can I lead him down the primrose path on that one, but,
This is my Lars.
Set you up.
yeah.
He set you up.
Yeah, so, if council.
We'll be handling Cullen's evaluation in 3 weeks.
Yeah. So if ever council needs something and I'm not available, please feel free to contact my office and ask for John also.
Super. Welcome.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Welcome, John.
We like working with your boss. We've worked for you now. You worked for us now 13 years?
This coming year will be 14.
Yeah.
Councilman Reed.
Albion City Workers Party is tomorrow, 12 to 1. Disney House.
Who did the cooking?
Mayor Pro Tem French.
I want to thank Len Reed for all of those small acts of kindness that you do for our city staff and for so many residents in this community. I haven't said it enough. I'm sure many people haven't said it enough. You are a gem in our city, and I appreciate everything you do to make everybody feel part of our city. So thank you.
I have 2 more years to do that. And
Only 2?
only 2.
And I would.
You can still do it.
Yeah,
You don't have to be on the council to do
No,
it.
you don't.
So
Yeah,
you have many more years. You like to do it, so. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I too, very appreciative of what you do for us as a community and for our employees. Nothing but class. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we don't meet again until after the holidays, so hope
Yes.
you all have a very peaceful Christmas,
Mhm.
safe New Year's. And then we'll get back to work in January, folks, 2025. I have a motion to adjourn.
So. Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned 9:21 PM.
Because this